Hello techies, I'm Divya here. On behalf of CyberBrainer, don't you think the world of tech is evolving faster than ever? Now is the perfect time to dive in and build the skills that will take you places. With CyberBrainer, we are putting you in the driver's seat of your own future. We at CyberBrainer don't just teach your interest. We believe that knowledge is power, but it's applied knowledge that truly sets you apart. Whether you're diving into data science, mastering artificial intelligence, or exploring the world of cybersecurity, our courses are designed to give you the skills that matter. So let's jump into the session and make the future yours today. Thank you.
If you want to communicate to somebody and that person doesn't understand English, that person understands all of the Spanish language. What we need to do? We need one translator that whatever I say, that can be translated by a translator, and this translator will share or will convey my message to the person who understands the Spanish language. And based on that, let's say I'm asking a question, how are you? This translator will translate this thing into a Spanish language, will convey this thing to the Spanish guy, and then, maybe he will give the output, and then we get the output. Maybe he's fine or something like that. Any programming language, be it AMPscript, SFMC, we have VRadio, and we have a long list of programming languages based on the functionality that that they can perform. Let's say if you want to deal with a server, as we might be using a different programming language, if you want to, say, sign up that page, or if you want to, develop some Android applications, we have a different standard. We also, develop iOS app. Then we have a different language for that, right? Based on the capabilities, we have different programming languages. But the basic fundamental will always remain same, that we are going to write a programming language somewhere. We need one as it says. For example, if you want to save something into a computer, what you will do? You will open a notepad, or maybe you will open a Word document and we save the information. In order to, then we can save, in order to convey this word or basically the message that we want, we need to write something, right? In Marketing Cloud, we are going to write it in Marketing Cloud itself. We are going to use the email messages where we are going to write our code. Once the code is written, we are going to do the figure and test or send the email and whenever basically execute this code. This code will be passed to the server. We have a server, we have another computer where this code will be passed and then it will be converted into a machine language. And then basically the CPU which is sitting on the server, the CPU will process this code, what is happening and all, and then it will return something. Meet any programming language. These things will always remain same. Whatever we do, we can just, take down three parts. One is the input and the processing and the output. And anything in the programming language can be broken down into these three parts. Whenever we write the code, that is our input, and the input will be given from the CPU for the processing. The input will be processed and we will get to output. For example, if I want to display my name on this thing, I'll have to write some code for that. I'll write one function or maybe some lines of code and I will pass this code to the CPU. The CPU will understand that what you are trying to say and then based on that, it will return me the result. The result would be that I will see my name, is printed on the history or maybe on the email message, right? Any doubts about the programming languages and how things work? Understood that. Now we will go ahead and understand these things from the AMPscript. AMPscript is Marketing Cloud's proprietary scripting language. What does it mean? That it is created by Marketing Cloud only, and it is created by Salesforce only, and it cannot be executed on any other platform. We can only use AMPscript on all the marketing platforms. Why do we use AMPscript? Each and every programming language has its own capabilities that we can perform. AMPscript is generally used for the personalization that you will see, and we know to make the content dynamic for the personalization, data formatting and all, and where we can use this. In learning pages, SS push messages emails. We can write the AMPscript in either of these risks. Now, these things you will understand as we move forward, because this will require some basic fundamentals. AMPscript code will be sent to the server, and then we will execute this code on the server. Where do we use AMPscript? If you want to retrieve the data from the Kit extensions, or if you want to personalize the email messages, or if you want to format the data, or if you want to deal with the date and time data. For all these things, we can use AMPscript. Now let's go ahead and see this in action. Let's get an email message. Let's give it a name. I'll just add some mandatory themes like this: double the address and file center. Now here we are going to write the AMPscript. The syntax is we'll use the double question. We have many syntax that we will understand. The first of the one of the syntax is blocked, AMPscript. We'll use double % size followed by this option bracket. And here we are going to write our code. And after we are going to close the AMPscript code with the star bracket and double % size. Basically, these are called delimiters. Now, what are delimiters in general? Delimiters are basically separators, or basically which tells us that from here, you know something other is going to be like, is going to start, or something else you know is a starting. For example, whenever we will share this entire thing, right, whatever is written in the page, we'll share it with the CPU. I mean, we will get this to the CPU for the processor. Now, how much of the thing can we identify that this is the HTML code, and whatever written on the line number 6 is the AMPscript code. With the help of these delimiters, whenever Marketing Cloud reads these directors at double % size followed by a double bracket, then what will happen? Marketing Cloud will understand that from here. Now AMPscript is going to start. Now we have to create this line, or we have to create basically or execute this line as an AMPscript code or not as a HTML code. This is my HTML. In order to separate my HTML code and the AMPscript code, we need delimiters. Here, let's write some. This is a function to make output. V is a function. We'll talk about the functions in detail, but just to show you, this is Whenever this code will be executed, we'll get this result. This is block number 6, right? Basically, whatever will pass here, it will return as AMP. Like, it will basically print on this. Now, the next syntax is the inline AMPscript. We have to use a double % size is equals to, and then we can write any function. And then let's say this is in line A, AMPscript, and then is equals to the same, followed by double % size. These are the two different ways that how we can execute the AMPscript or how we can write the AMPscript. What is the difference between them? Let's say if you have only one function, functions are basically in any programming block of code that we can execute that in a perform some functionality. Let's say if we'll talk about in a car, if we'll press, a button to turn on the AC, what we'll do? We have to turn on the button to turn on the AC and then let it turn on that. That is a function that we can perform. Similarly, in programming languages, we have different functions. Using that, we can perform a function. If you want to print something on the screen, it will use a v function. If you, in our program is basically, contains lines of coded. If if in our program there's only one function that you want to execute, then we can use this inline AMPscript. Inline AMPscript can only contain one line. But if our program contains multiple lines, then we have to go with the block AMPscript. We'll understand about the different things like conditional statements, store loop in AMPscript. If we have multiple lines, then we'll go ahead with the block AMPscript. But if you want to execute only one single function, then we can use, or basically we can execute the code using inline AMPscript. Another syntax that we have is the script tag. This is the syntax that we are not going to use very often. But just to show you, we will use the script tag and we will pass these two attributes render, and it is just a server and language is equal to AMPscript. And then here we will close the script tag, and in between the opening and the closing tag we have to write our AMPscript code. I'm going to write the same name. We'll have all these lines, the block AMPscript inline tag. And you must be wondering that we are using the v function to print something on the screen or the email message. And we are also using this r function. What happens is that basically the v function is something which is responsible to display the message on the screen. But v function alone cannot work in the block AMPscript. If we will write like this, v function, if we will write like this, what will happen? That it will throw the error. In case of we will not get the output. And in case of block AMPscript, we have to use the output function surrounding v function that it can work. Just remember this, that if you want to print something on the screen, we have to use the v function. But v function can work on its own in case of inline AMPscript. But in case of block AMPscript, v function doesn't work alone. We have to use output function along with this if you want to print something on the screen. If you understood the COO is to write the AMPscript code, AMPscript lock, and then inline AMPscript and tag list. Now let's move on. In programming language, we have something called variables. Now, what are these variables? Variables are nothing but are temporary memory blocks in which we are going to store something. Right now, what we are doing, that we are passing the message directly into this function. How do you identify a function? Whenever we write something and it has these describe brackets or next one, but these brackets around it, next to it, then what does it mean that it is a function? For example, Rokine. Basically, whenever we have, these two characters next to any name or any function, then it is called a function. Right now, they are passing directly this name to the function. If you want to print something on the screen, but now, let's say I have this data which is coming from the external system or maybe from my data extension. And what I want to do, that I want to store this first in a variable in a temporary memory location. And then from there, I want to print this on the screen. How do we declare a variable or how do we create a variable? We have syntax called that, and then we also have to use at the right symbol, and let's say first name. And later on, we will understand that how we can retrieve the data from the data extension. But right now, let me hard code the value. Let's say first name. Now, whenever on line number 7, whenever marketing will read this type, what will happen? That in the backend, this blue box that you can see is my entire memory. Whenever we in computer we have and then we'll say a hard drive, and we also have this random access memory, right? Not in random and system memory. What happens that whenever you want to run a program, let's say if you want to play music on your computer, right? What will happen then? This application or this program will get some memory in the random access memory. And as soon as we will close the music or you will close this application, which are using, let's say VLC media for anything, the memory that was allocated to this program, to this, application to run the music will be terminated. This application will be removed from the memory and some another computer, like another program, might take the memory. Many times that you must have seen that earlier. What needs to happen? That we had very limited size of the RAM. Let's say 500 MB or 256 MB, something like that in the past. Like we had this thing in our mind that if we increase the memory size, it will increase the RAM size. Then our computer will work a bit faster. Why? Because in number of programs that we can run at any one point of time depends on that. What is the size of the memory? Let's say if one program is taking, let's say 10 MB of the space in the computer and we only have 256 MB of the memory, 256 MB of RAM, then we are limited with how many programs that we can run at any given point of time. And at some point, like they really start facing the lagging and start experiencing the slowest mode of the computer. What will happen that we have this program? And whenever we are creating, I mean, whenever the computer will read this line, that their first name, what will happen? Marketing Cloud, or basically the system will create one temporary location. We have this entire memory inside this memory. We have small memory blocks. Now one of the memory block will be allocated to this variable, or you can say that we are giving this very first name. What will happen? That the marketing will create one variable, or basically will allocate this memory block to this program. And what would be the name of this memory block? First name. We have the entire RAM, and inside this RAM, we have small memory blocks. And one of the memory block is assigned to this variable called the first name. And initially it doesn't have anything. It is blank. Now, if you want to assign some value, you want to store something in this memory location. At the end of the day, what is the purpose of a memory block? Because if you want to store something otherwise, there is no need of memory. There is no point of having the memory blocks. We'll use this set keyword and we'll use add first name. Is it custom? Now what will happen? That marketing will store. No, answer me one question that like every time I've been to store the name or maybe the alphabets, or we can also store the numbers, right? Maybe let's say we'll talk about mobile memory. Set for number, and this will not be a text, right? This will be unnumbered. Let's say, like this, right? This is my number. We can understand that. We might need to store different type of data in the memory profile. It will not always be the alphabets, but sometimes it would be alphabets. Sometimes it would be a number. Sometimes it would be a mixture of the alphabets and numbers. Sometimes it would be a decimal, right? We can see we have different type of data or different category of data that we might just store in the memory block. Based on that, we have different data types. We can see either we can store the number. If you want to store the number in a variable, then we don't need to use the double quotes around it, and we can just store this as it is. But in case of we want to store the alphabets or basically the text, then what we need to do? We need to surround this, or we need to do this with the double quotation or the single quotes. If you want to store the numbers 1, 2, 3 minus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? We can store as it is. But if you want a string, if you want to store our text, which is nothing but a string, we have to use either a single quote or a double quote. The next one we have is that many times we see that the data or maybe that we want to store, either it would be a true or false. For example, that if I'll say that are you Amazon Prime member, it would be either true or false. It cannot be that. 1, 2, 3, it cannot be. Right. It would be either true or false. Many times we see that we want to store the values which would have possibly 2 values. We want to store the data which could have possibly 2 values, either 4 or false. That if you want to store whether the email is sent or not, it will be true or false. For those kinds of data that we want to store, we don't need to use a double quotation as well. And the value that we can store is true or false. Let's see this in action. First one is that if you want to store around, we have to use the double quotes, and if you want to store a number, then we can store it directly. Now I'm going to use this output view function. Let me remove all this code that it doesn't get any confusion. And then here I'm going to pass this variable name. At that first, then you must be wondering that, before assigning the value to the first name variable, we also use this better keyword in order to create it in the memory location. And then we assign the value. If you will directly use the set keyword and we will assign the value, then marketing through. Assume that you might have forgotten this. And don't worry about it. Like by reading this line, what marketing will do that? It will do what? First of all, it will see whether we have this memory location by the name, phone number. If it is not there, it will create the memory and then it will assign the value. But we have two options of basically we have to waste. Either we can specifically in Venetian and then we can have the memory allocated first and then we can assign the value, or we can just directly assign the value. That Marketing Cloud will, as you all will understand that, we must have for ourselves, and the Marketing Cloud will create them as a consequence on its own before assigning the value. And I'm going to use the output function again. At the rate phone number. We can see we are able to bring both of these. Now let's make some mistakes and see whether we are able to do that. If I remove these quotations and then we started text when you into this variable, I'm trying to store this and do this variable, but I don't have. I'm not using the quotation marks, and what is the output that we get? We are getting this error, and it seems that this and this line, and they are not able to store this element of video. But if you're not using the quotation marks, either we can use a single person, whenever we quotation marks, whenever you use this course, single foot or double foot, it will be treated as a text type. And if you don't use the quotation marks, it will be treated as number. We can have this quotation marks around the number and then it will be treated as a number. There is no problem with that. But if you will not use this quotation marks, what Marketing Cloud will understand that this is a number, but this is actually not a number. That is why we have a problem. But in text-based, and we can either restore, with the help of the quotation, either we can store the text or maybe the number. But if you will not use this, then Marketing Cloud will understand this as a number. And then we cannot store Rahul as a number in the memory. We'll also see the result. The result will remain same. The third thing that we can restore, let's say set at the rate, is in real time. We want to check whether the email has been sent or not. It's either it would be true or false. This is also an alphabet, but here we are not including any words. If the alphabet is true or false, then basically there is an exception of what we can say that this falls under the only in data type category, and the data type only the text based on the screen. Basically use the quotation marks. That is fine. But if I'll write with safety, this is not either a true or false, because we only have this, we have this leverage from them to enforce certain we are not able to store that. But if it is pure false, then we are able to store it, because in case of common false, it is not treated as a string. but it is being treated as a Boolean data type or a Boolean data. Any confusion far? What is a variable and why do we need a variable? Because we want to store something into the memory location that we can use it further. And then how we can store the data? We have different category of data, different type of data, and we understood it. How we can install the data. Either we want to store a number, we can do that. If you want to store a string or a text, we can do that. Or if you want to store a brilliant value, then we can store that. We understood the different tools and the that set of rules that we need to follow if you want to store the data in the variable. If no doubt, let's move on. There are some best practices, and there's a few things that we'll understand about the variable. Variable names are case insensitive. What does it mean? That let's say we have one number over here, and if I'll try to access this variable by like this phone number at 4 dozen, the capital case, then also it will give the same result. It is not a case sensitive. It doesn't matter that what is the same, like what is the case that we're using in terms of writing the variable name. But in case of JavaScript, like you understand the other language, that is SSJs. In SSJs, the variable names and the function names are the case sensitive. There you will have to be mindful while accessing or by writing the variable names. Now while writing or while basically creating a variable, we have to be mindful that we cannot have the comma in the variable name. We cannot have the spaces in the variable name. Apart from these two things, everything should be fine. And the variable name always start with the @ symbol. And it should have one other letter number or the understand. As for the best practice, we always should give the meaningful variable that if any other developer looks at the code, he will be able to understand of what's happening over here. We are restoring the first name of the customer here. We are storing the phone number of the customer here. We are checking whether the email has been sent to but technically it is possible. Let's say I will give this and I'll do this and this. Technically this is possible, but if I'll write like this, it doesn't tell me that what this variable is all about, what we are trying to restore over here, and what we are doing with this variable. We should all be like. The recommendation is that we should always give the meaningful name to the variables, that it becomes, easy for the another person to read the code, or this way to understand that what is happening in the code. And we should always follow one notation that is first camera. Either I can write, first name like this as well. But, later on we will understand that apart from the variables, we basically, assign the name to many things. Right? There's a variable, or maybe another programming languages. We have functions, we have other things as well. It is always the best practice that we will use this notation, without even looking at that, is it a variable or not? I can understand that it is a variable. And there's always a best practice that we should always follow one notation that that this is a variable. If you're using this notation, in camera case notation, what should happen? The first word that we have of the variable will always be in this small case. And the first character of the second word will be in the capital S. And the subsequent words will always have the first character in that capital. Let's say this will be in this one. And the second word, email, will have first in the capital S and the third word also will have its first letter in the capital S. We should always follow this notation. And you always give them a meaningful variable. How do we declare a variable, or basically how we tell marketing that you have to basically allocate some memory to this variable. We can use that keyword that we saw. Variable declaration is optional in AMPscript. As we saw that even if we'll not use this keyword, we are good for Marketing Cloud. We'll assume that the most appropriate, and the Marketing Cloud will automatically create the memory. There's one concept that we have to understand. We have this where keyword, and what happens whenever marketing will create line number 7. It means we have to create one variable, and whenever a variable is created in the location. First of all, the black will be like null value, or we can say the blank value will be assigned, or like it will start the blank. Now, when we use the set keyword, you can see what to assign some. Now let's say if I'll do the same at the first note. What will happen? That at line number 9, Marketing Cloud will try to create another variable by the name first name. But this is not possible, that we cannot have the same name of two different variables in the same memory location, right? Otherwise, how will we be able to identify that which one we are referring if both have the same names? This is not possible. What Marketing Cloud will do, first it will find that whether the variable that the first name is already there in the system or not. If this is there, it will assign the blank value. We have the blank value again, or basically, I will basically wipe off the content of the variable. Let's see, let's run this and see whether it is true or not. First it will be blank, and then we will have this value as the whole, and then again it will be blank. When we will output, it will show us the blank, right? Let's do this. We are not able to print the values because now it contains the blank value. If we'll remove this, then what will happen? Then we will have the latest values around. That will be printed on this. If anybody has any doubt, please do like, share and subscribe to our channel.